Thanks. So welcome, Mariah. We appreciate your time. Go ahead and introduce yourselves. And do you need to share your screen?
I do have a PowerPoint. It's kind of outdated. So I mean, it's up to everybody if they want to see the PowerPoint. I can also just send it to you if you want, um, for later.
Yeah, it's totally. I can give you share. I'll grant you access right now.
Okay. Um,
There you go.
it's probably better if I don't share my screen because I don't have my split screens today. I'm in Idaho
There we
Falls.
go. Yeah, you're
So
totally.
then I wouldn't be able to see everybody. Um, but I can send this PowerPoint to you, and you can distribute it to those that need.
Yeah, we'll send it out when we send the recording. How about that?
Thank you.
Perfect.
So I am Mariah Myler and I work for Disability Services. I'm a service coordinator or specialist, and I help students get accommodations and have access to resources on campus that they need. Um, and so just so I remember correctly, you guys work with the schools to kind of prepare students to coming into college. Is that correct?
Yeah. So they're taking coursework in our high schools from
Okay.
our instructors who are approved to be teaching those courses. They are
Okay.
Idaho State University courses. So our students who have access to any disability services needed um, from us, essentially.
Perfect. Um, So that I think that's one of the biggest, most important things to remember is that as high school students, if you're taking dual enrollment classes or anything that's considered ISU students, then the accommodations should come through our office, even if they already have a prior IEP or 504 in place within the high school. Um, so our role as disability services is to really increase equal opportunity and equal access to all programs and services sponsored by ISU. And we do that by creating accessible environments for students. And in this case, it would be the high school students as well. Um, we provide a wide range of accommodations. The most important thing to remember is that they have to be reasonable, non-burdensome, and they can't jeopardize the learning objectives or what's being measured. So really the fundamental components of the course need to be taken into consideration when looking at if an accommodation is appropriate. One of the things that we see a lot of students coming over from the high school with in the testing setting would be like altered exams. So multiple choice questions with two response options instead of four or shortened coursework. And that is something that at the collegiate level is going to fundamentally alter what's being measured. And so that's not an accommodation that we can provide students. However, we can look at what other testing accommodations can we provide the student with to continue to support them in that change of testing situation that they're experiencing. So we can do extra time, a private testing room. We can look into readers, um, music while testing, things like that to help them, feel more comfortable in that setting. Um, and I think that's really the most important thing is having those conversations with students of getting them to our office and helping them build a relationship with us so that we can sit down and understand what they're struggling with and how that may look different at a collegiate level class than a high school class. And then also remind them that these these courses go on their transcripts, right? And so if they are struggling and they need their accommodations, then it's important to meet with us before they're really failing the course and it's going to jeopardize their GPA moving forward, right? Um, and then we also can provide like physical adjustments. So if the student is coming to campus to take these dual enrollment courses and they need like lumbar support chairs or wheelchair access, they would work with our office as well to figure all of that out. Um, Another thing that I really like about our office is we have a wide range of assistive technology tools that are available to all students on campus. So we have a screen reader called Read and Write. And that is going to read Google Docs, PDFs, Google websites, anything like that. And that is free for all ISU students, and they would just need to contact our office to get that downloaded. It also has some other features of that are useful to students with like dyslexia. It can cover like the top and bottom so you're only reading one line at a time. It can change your background to like blue or green, so that way that can help your eyes track a little bit better based on what you are used to. And then we also have another one that is really useful that is called Glean for note taking. And that essentially audio records everything that it hears and it stores it in a cloud database. And so it doesn't take storage on a student's computer or their cell phone. There's an app for it as well. They can take their notes directly into this system and it will timestamp them every time they hit enter. So they can go back and look at those notes later and get to the spot that they need to in the recording. But also it's going to transcribe that whole recording. So then they'd have that written version of the lectures to go back and study later. That one is a technology that we only provide for students that are working with our office. But high school students would qualify for that under the dual enrollment requirement there. And then we are located in the Rendezvous building. And do you guys work with students on the other campuses like Twin Falls or Meridian, Idaho Falls, anything like that?
Probably Meridian, Idaho Falls would be the two that, yes, there would be potentially students coming to.
Okay. So I actually work out of Idaho Falls on Wednesday. So if you have students that would like to meet with somebody in person but can't make it to Pocatello, they are welcome to meet with me on Wednesdays. And then we are in the process of hiring a new person to fill our Meridian specialist spot. So hopefully within the next like 3-ish weeks, we'll have somebody there to meet in person, and then they can support them that way.
Can I ask a real quick question? This
Yeah.
just kinda jumped into my head. So how would students then who are very rural students be able
Mhm.
to access our services in that situation?
Yeah, so they would just need to call our main office or email our main office and fill out the application, and then we can do phone calls for appointments or Zoom. And it would be the same as meeting in person.
Okay, great, wonderful. That's super helpful information.
Mm-hmm. Another thing to keep in mind too is that we do some outreach programs. And so a lot of times students that are taking dual enrollment classes are kind of familiar with our faces and kind of who we are from doing those outreach reality towns. And so it's a little easier to get them to come to our office that way, I think, once they have a familiar face. Yeah. That is like my overview spiel. Are there any questions that I can answer?
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Our high school counselors, are they supposed to receive this as well, where we're teaching dual credit? Are they supposed to watch this video as well?
Yeah, that'd be helpful. What we will do, Shar, is send that out to both the instructor and counselor listserv.
Oh, okay.
So
Well,
you're
I mean, I don't have any kids on IEPs or anything like that, but I've had discussions with counselors with kids on IEPs that say that their IEP will follow them in college and they follow those. And I had to say, no, they do not. And so, yeah, I've had discussions with about that. And so I'm hoping our counselors see this too, so they know that IEPs are not the same in a college or even 504s, necessarily. I know you guys have services, but not like changing an exam or making an exam easier or something like
Mhm.
that. So, yeah.
And
Yeah.
I have Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna have you dive deeper into the
Oh.
difference and how that works. Yeah.
Not with me right now, but we do have a nice handout that kind of, in a broad sense, covers the difference between high school accommodations and college accommodations. And I will find that and attach that to the PowerPoint, and then I'll send so that or teachers and counselors can have that. And is it Charlize? So
Yes.
that you brought up a great point. Students do have access to disability services at the collegiate level. But it is the student's responsibility to seek out those services. Whereas in K through 12, right, they're tested and making sure that they can keep up with regular class style and assignments and things like that. And if they start falling behind, they're tested, added to special ed, given a 504, an IEP. So there's not a lot that the student has to do to receive those services. It's really, parent driven, school driven. Whereas in college, we don't receive a list of students that have had previous services, right? You apply for college and we don't know. We don't know you from the next person, right? And so it is the student's responsibility to come to our office and create that relationship and talk about how they're struggling. And then they'd receive their accommodations. And we send letters to professors every single semester. So you can't just meet with us once, when you're first accepted and think that that's going to go with you your whole academic career. It's your responsibility to come to us and say, I'm taking classes this semester. These are my classes and these are the accommodations that I want. So we can really tailor it to specific courses, which is nice, but we have to have that relationship and know that students are coming to work with our office.
Yeah, I would really like something on that for our counselors because I really think that they really don't know how it transfers to the college level. And so anyway, I'd love that.
Yeah, I will make sure to find that and provide that to you.
So Mariah, I think one of the biggest challenges that instructors, counselors perhaps have is involving parents, or rather maybe not involving parents in this situation. Can you speak a little bit more about that, making sure that, that everyone knows that the student is the person who has to reach out, that type of situation?
Yes, you bring up a good point. So once a student is enrolled at ISU, regardless of their age, so if they're 16, 17, taking dual enrollment courses, they fall under FERPA, and so they become the owners of their own academic transcripts and are responsible for that. So the university, if parents want to be involved, the student would need to fill out a release of information with every department that the parent wants to be involved in. And so that is something that, I recognize that parents are good supports and that they have good questions, and sometimes it's scary for students, or sometimes students just don't understand exactly what they've been diagnosed with or how it's impacting them, right? So we love when parents are coming to support their kids, but we really want the students to be self-advocates and taking responsibility for their education and how they're being impacted by their disability. And so if a parent comes to an intake meeting, we bring the student in first and we sit down and have a conversation with them of, you're responsible for making sure that you get us the documentation and XYZ, but would you also appreciate to have your parent here? And if they give that verbal consent and fill out an ROI, then we pull the parent in and can have those conversations. But that is important for parents to know, that if they just call our office and they say, my kid is in a dual enrollment course, I know they have accommodations through you guys, I want to know what those accommodations are. Why didn't my student get this or that, right? if we don't have a release of information, then we can't share that they work with our office. No matter what their age is, even if they're minors.
Ryan, would you have any recommendations for perhaps an instructor who is working with a student and is not certain whether they really need accommodations or not? Maybe there's not an IEP or 504 in place. Would you consider your office a good resource to kind of troubleshoot some of those things, or where should they start?
If a instructor suspects that a student is struggling due to a disability, I think just saying, hey, I've noticed that you're struggling with XYZ. Here are a plethora of resources that you can use, right? Since it's a dual enrollment course, have you considered working with disability services at ISU? Here's counseling resources within the school. And then what can we do for tutoring or things like that, right? So maybe not singling out just disability services, but having some other resources to just say, hey, I recognize you're struggling. Let's figure out what to do. And even if the student does not have an IEP or 504, they're more than welcome to meet with our office. Because we also recognize that college classes are different from high school classes, right? Sometimes you can just show up to class and put in, 70% in high school and not struggle, when in college you really do have to give that extra mile sometimes to learn. And so your disability is going to present itself differently in those two situations. And so you may have never needed support in high school, but when it comes to those collegiate level courses, the anxiety is higher, right? It's like the stakes in general are higher. And so that just is going to exacerbate things. So they're more than welcome to come and meet with our office, and we can talk about what's going on. And then if our office isn't where they need to be, we can help them find the resources that they need on campus.
And one of the thoughts I had too is perhaps maybe even a new instructor who doesn't have that pocket of resources.
Mm-hmm.
Our Disability Services Center could definitely be a resource for them, do you feel?
Yes. Mm-hmm. And if new instructors are not familiar with how things should be going, or if they have questions about what's on the accommodation letter that comes from our office, give us a call and we'll talk about what we need to. We'll explain the accommodations a little bit more in depth if that's what needs to go on. We can hook you up with, like IT, make sure that things are running smoothly through Moodle, things like that.
Any other questions for Mariah?
I do have one comment while you guys think of questions, and that is, I know that it can be a pain to have students come to our office and get accommodation letters when probably the grand majority of the time, what's on their IEP or 504 is going to match what our letters say. But having them go through the process and becoming familiar with our office while they're in high school and in those dual enrollment courses sets them up to be better off when they do come to college full time, because they know what to expect in the courses. They're not going to be blindsided that, oh, I took a dual enrollment course in high school and my teacher let me, only do 70% of the coursework and it still counted as an A, or my exams were altered, or I could use notes on everything, even though that wasn't in my accommodation letter, right? And so that's going to be a way harder transition than if they would have worked with our office for that dual enrollment class to get familiar with the system.
Welcome, Tanya. Do you have any questions for Mariah?
Another thing that I just thought of, I don't know how it works in the K through 12 system of like when students become eligible for accommodations. But at the collegiate level, a student can come to our office at any point during the semester. And so if they start struggling, in the middle of this semester in these dual enrollment courses, they don't have to fail the course or struggle through. They can come to our office at any point to receive accommodations. And then with that, sorry, all these things are just coming to my mind now. With that, if the student does not have an IEP or 504, they do not have to wait until they are diagnosed or have documentation to come meet with our office. Encourage them to come meet with us, and we will work with them to get the appropriate documentation needed for the accommodations. Most of the time, we can provide a conditional semester of accommodations while we wait for documentation. There are some things like note cards or like flexibility in being able to turn in assignments late that we do need specific documentation before we can grant those accommodations. But if the student is just like, I really just struggle being in the classroom with all this noise and these distractions, it would be helpful to be in a private room where I can just read questions to myself out loud. That's something that we can put into place while we wait for documentation. Because we recognize that, especially with COVID, there is a long waiting list to receive like full psychological evaluations or get into some mental health providers. And so we don't want students to have to struggle forever when they are the experts on themselves. And so we try and work with them that way.
So Mariah, those accommodations wouldn't go into effect until they at least come in and speak with you. So they couldn't go like retroactive. So if they come in like mid-semester, it's not gonna say like, oh, well, you missed all these assignments already. We can't do anything to say those can still be go in late. Is that correct?
That is correct. So if a student does get like an occasional flexibility to turn assignments in late due to like a reoccurring disability or like an episodic disability, it's not retroactive. So that is why we recommend students come to us as early in the semester as possible. We'll work with them when they do come to us, but we can't erase what has happened.
Any other questions for Mariah? Mariah, how can they contact you or the Disability Services Center?
So they would call our main office at 208-282-3599. And then they would receive an email. Well, let me back up. Dual enrollment students get ISU email addresses. That's correct.
They do, but the majority of them don't use them.
Okay. But that would mean that they have access to my ISU, which syncs with our system.
Not necessarily, but we can check about that. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, I would recommend that they just call our front office, and then we will send them instructions to access our application. If they have access to my ISU and like a login to that, they would fill out one application. If they don't, they would fill out a different one. But they would still be able to meet with a specialist. So just call the front office, or if they happen to be on campus, they can stop in and get scheduled to meet with a specialist.
And
we do not do, oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say, in your location, Rendezvous, what's the?
Rendezvous 125. We do not do same day appointments. But most of the time, unless we're around midterms or finals or the first week of the semester, we can get students in like the next day to meet. And we do phone appointments, in person and Zoom. And we're here to support.
Great. Well, yes, if there's any questions, we definitely encourage everyone to reach out to Disability Services. Mariah, are you one of the coordinators that would assist high school students?
I am. So there's 3 of us, myself, Bailey, and Andrew. And then I don't know who we're hiring in Meridian, but there will be somebody there in Meridian. And we all do the same thing. We collaborate together. So hopefully students aren't like, oh, this one person is way better than the other. Like we try and be equal in all that we do, right? And we're a team in that way. And so they're not going to get different service if they see me versus Andrew or Bailey. But yeah.
Tanya, I know that you may have joined late. Do you have any questions for Mariah?
I don't have any questions, mainly because I don't have any students right now that would need it, but it's really nice to know that it's available if I happen to have some kids that need these kinds of services, how to access it. That's good peace of mind, but I don't have anybody right now, so I don't have any questions because I don't know what they would be yet.
Well, in the event that you do, I guess you know who to reach out to, right?
Right.
Yes, if you ever have questions, I will put my contact information in the PowerPoint as well, along with our front office information, and you're more than welcome to send us an email, give us a call. Even if you aren't quite sure if a student should meet with our office, just call us and we can talk about what's going on and get the student the best support that they need. I will also put a plug in that our office does do Braille. So if you have blind students who need Braille, they would work with our office to get their textbooks and things accessible that way. And then we also have a lot of deaf and hard of hearing resources as well. And we provide interpreters. So if you ever have students that need interpreting needs, you can contact Casey Kitos and she would be able to support in that way.
What is the most common used accommodation, like a couple of them that the colleges use?
Honestly, the most common are going to be testing accommodations of extra time, which is normally just 1.5 extra time. And then reduced distraction testing rooms or private testing rooms are the majority of what students are receiving. And then I would say we have an influx of note-taking supports, and that's what we use the Glean for, and provide students with services that way. And then we also have, it's not an accommodation, but it's a partnership that we have with the Masters of Counseling and Masters of Occupational Therapy programs on campus to provide students with academic coaches. So sometimes students struggle with organizational skills or time management skills, or they struggle navigating Moodle, right? And so we have students that they can meet with weekly to help them go through their Moodle, create a schedule, kind of hold them accountable to that schedule and learn those skills. Again, that's not an accommodation, and we don't always have that. It's dependent on interns that we can have hired and what that looks like. But we try to support in that way as well.
All right. Well, feel free to reach out to Mariah and Disability Services if there is any need or questions with resources. And we'll see you at our next Wednesday webinar. Thanks, everybody.